Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Free with David Aragona. This is Daily Race Inform's weekly Derby Watch Top 20. David, we saw something special last week in the Risen Star Stakes at Fairgrounds, but we also were reminded just days later how difficult it is not only to win the Kentucky Derby, but to just get there. So what happened with the Risen Star winner Magnitude in the race and days later?
Yeah, I woke up the other morning wondering if it was all just a dream because it felt like the entire Kentucky Derby and picture had changed with the Risen Star. And then days later, learning that Magnitude will be out of the Triple Crown from our colleague Marcus Hirsch. Magnitude, I was going to have him at the top of Derby Watch this week at the 8-1 favoritism price off his 108 buyer, winning the Risen Star by nearly 10 lengths as a 43-1 shot. So not one that the public saw coming, but Brad, we know speed figures well. You compare that time to any other time on the fairgrounds card of the dirt, any way you broke it down, it came up an extremely fast race. And Magnitude, whether you thought he was legitimate or not, was an exciting horse to have as a conversation topic on the road towards the Kentucky Derby. But all of that chatter now comes to an end with the news that he'll be out with a bone chip.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. The argument is now moot. It doesn't really make any difference right now. But that was a dominating performance, the most impressive performance we've seen by a member of this crop, I believe. David, we're going to make Magnitude the favorite on Derby Watch Top 20, which is, I think, a reflection of what you thought the public might do. I'm curious what your take is, and first I'll give you mine. How, if Magnitude had not been injured and he had gone forward, whether you would take the race at face value or whether you believe that the bias was, a huge contributing factor. I was willing to acknowledge the bias, but when a horse runs as fast as Magnitude did, I have to take them seriously. And a couple reasons, we just have to go back to last year. Mystic Dan's win in the Southwest was dominating, but it was with a golden rail. 2 starts later, he won the Kentucky Derby. And 2 years ago, 2 Phils ran a huge number in the Jeff Ruby Stakes on the Turfway Park synthetic surface, and skeptics, and I'm often one of them, said, well, we don't know if 2 Phils can, run that same race on dirt. He came back and finished second in the Kentucky Derby. He ran better than Mage. My point is, in the last couple of years, we've seen horses take advantage of favorable conditions and then reproduce that form in the Kentucky Derby. So I liked Magnitude. I would have liked him going forward. What about your personal opinion?
Yeah, as you said, it's kind of a moot point now, but the argument I was going to make when we did the show this week was that Magnitude, while he might have been aided by a slight bias, whether you thought it was a speed bias or a rail bias, I probably thought it was a little more speed than the rail. There were other horses on the card that got similar trips that were not improving their buyers by 20 to 25 points the way that Magnitude did. So it's hard to use the track bias as the only explanation for why he would have improved that much. And I think that adds a layer of legitimacy to the number as well as the margin of victory and the way that he just completely dominated that field. You bring up Mystic Dan, who I think is a great comparison because he was another horse that when he won that Southwest, it was argued by us and I think a lot of other handicappers that was a bias-aided performance, but he did come back and run a similar number in the Kentucky Derby. And I think Magnitude was a horse that would have been in the Kentucky Derby, barring injury. Obviously, that did come to fruition. So just given that, and given the fact that he had this huge number, I thought it was inevitable he would take money in the Derby. So I was going to make him one of the shorter prices this week and was excited to see what he might do a couple months down the road. But obviously, we won't get to see that now.
Well, the Risen Star winner is not going to be on the Derby Trail, but the Risen Star Stakes actually influenced the complexion of the Derby Watch Top 20 this week. And in fact, the odds-on favorite, East Avenue, is one of 3 horses that we have dropped from the list. East Avenue was 4-5, making his first start since a troubled also ran finish in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. David, East Avenue could not have run any worse, and that's why we dropped him from the list. What's your take on East Avenue out of the Risen Star?
Yeah, East Avenue was the big disappointment in the Risen Star and obviously opened the door for somebody else to step through and put forth the kind of dominant performance that Magnitude did. But East Avenue tried to run with the eventual winner around the far turn, and you could see a long way from home that he was not finding anything, and he was basically eased through the stretch of that race. And all 3 of the horses that were dropping from Derby Watch this week are not officially off the Kentucky Derby Trail, but I know in our eyes, Brad, we're skeptical that any of these horses are going to make make the Kentucky Derby at this point.
Absolutely. East Avenue dropped from the list. As of early this week, trainer Brendan Walsh did not have an explanation for that subpar performance, and he's going to train this colt on, see what he can do with him. Another horse that was dropped off of our list was Jonathan's Way, who scratched from the Risen Star. His blood work was off. Trainer Phil Bauer did not sound all that bullish in an interview last weekend. David, I don't have any problem dropping Jonathan's Way off the list based on, the uncertainty surrounding his status.
Yeah, you never know how long a horse is going to take to recover from that kind of thing, but obviously it's a big blow to have one of your key prep races now crossed off the calendar, and Jonathan's Way would have to get to the Kentucky Derby if he recovers quickly with just one prep race before the Derby, which is never ideal. And as for the other horse that we're dropping from the list, Disco Time, a horse that some people might be surprised to see us dropping from Derby Watch, but if you're following his trajectory since the Lecomte, he has not had a workout in the morning since that victory on January 18th. So I think that really puts him and Brad Cox up against the wall of trying to make the Kentucky Derby, getting this horse just back on the work tab before he can consider another prep race.
Yeah, he's not off the trail officially. And in fact, Brad Cox, I believe, told one of our colleagues, I think it was Mary Rampolini early this week, that the Arkansas Derby on March 29th or the Bluegrass on April 5th are potential targets for Disco Time until he returns to the work tab. And it's been a month since he raced. I don't feel any discomfort in dropping him. So East Avenue, Jonathan's Way, and Disco Time, the three drops. That left room for three adds, including the 2-3 finishers from the Risen Star, David, Built and Chunk of Gold.
Yeah, I think they're logical horses to add at this point. The Risen Star was a 50 point to the winner prep race. Obviously, those points for the winner are now off the table, but Built has racked up some points from his victory in the Gun Runner as well as his third place finisher here. And Chunk of Gold got up for second at a big price. 25 points are not going to be enough to get into the Kentucky Derby, but he's going to get another chance likely in a 100-point prep next time out.
Built and Chunk of Gold were added. And the very last horse that we added, and the only reason he got onto the list, is when Magnitude came out. That's Baeza, and we'll talk a little bit more about his maiden win at Santa Anita in a few minutes. Very impressive, a well-bred colt who is headed the right direction, and he'll be running next in the Santa Anita Derby. So Built, Chunk of Gold, and Baeza, the three adds to this week's top 20. The biggest race last weekend, David, let's talk a little bit more about the Risen Star. It was down at Fairgrounds. It was the season's first 50 points to the winner race. And a lot of people were kind of saying that, this was a foregone conclusion. East Avenue training great. He was going to go out and, run away with the Risen Star. Didn't quite turn out that way.
Yeah, and you could kind of see it was not going to be a foregone conclusion right under the wire for the first time when Magnitude was ridden so aggressively from the outside post to get in front of East Avenue. And one of the things that we did not know about East Avenue coming into the Risen Star was whether or not he could be successful without controlling the pace on the front end. And I don't think we got any kind of positive answer coming out of that race. As for the two horses that we're adding to Derby Watch, Built and Chunk of Gold, Built, I thought at least deserves some credit for issuing a challenge to Magnitude coming around the far turn once East Avenue gated up. He tried to go with the winner and just couldn't ultimately match strides with that one through the stretch and just got nipped on the wire for second. And Chunk of Gold, he was picking up pieces at the end. Some might say that he was very much with the flow of a track that was slightly tilted towards runners that rode the rail and saved ground because he came right up that inside path to get up for second. But he was a horse that had shown some potential in his first couple of starts on synthetic and turfway. So he might just be an improving 3-year-old.
Yeah, I thought Bill deserved some extra credit. He was 3 wide most of the trip, and maybe the inside was the best place to be. Made a run at Magnitude, and then he just got nailed right on the wire. As for Chunk of Gold, I thought he actually ran okay. Yeah, he had the racetrack in his favor in the stretch, but he checked rather sharply at the quarter pole and some heavy traffic, had to get going again, and was up to nail Built right on the wire for second. So a couple of decent colts who are headed the right direction. I think if anything, Built's third place finish with a 92 buyer kind of suggests that low fig that he earned in the Lecomte, that was the aberration, and he's really a 92 buyer type horse at this stage. So good to see him run back to his previous high number, that being Built finishing third. All right, that's as far as the significance of the Risen Star Stakes goes. We touched on this last week, talking about how this race has produced an inordinate number of very successful Derby contestants. Whether that transpires this year with a couple of horses who got beat nearly 10 lengths remains to be seen. Okay, over to Santa Anita. It was only a maiden race, but Baeza is not just any old maiden. He's a son of the dam Puka, and all Puka has done is produce Kentucky Derby winner Mage and Belmont winner Dornoch. Baeza was making his third career start last Friday at Santa Anita, his second start on dirt and his second start since adding blinkers. Let's roll the tape of the stretch run. You're going to see Baeza broke it open on the turn, and inside, turning the top of the stretch, the race is over. But Baeza was kind of looking around, so Barrios struck him once with the right-handed whip, and Baeza took a left-hand turn. He's a little green through the stretch. He got his stride going again and won clear with a 93 Beyer speed figure. Baeza did. He's the son of Mackenzie, half a sibling to both Mage and Dornoch, and you can see from his numbers, 68, 87, 93, he's going the right direction, came out of the race in very good shape, and his next start, trainer John Sheriffs has confirmed, if all goes well, will be in the Santa Anita Derby in early April. David, I like this colt a lot. I have to confess, I'm a little bit of a homer. He's a California-based horse, and he's trained by one of my favorite trainers of all time, John Sheriffs. What is your take from New York? Perhaps you're a little more skeptical than I would be otherwise. What do you think about Baeza?
Well, look, we agree on one thing. This horse has ability. I think that's clear from his last couple of dirt starts where he was second to Rodriguez, who just ran off the screen that day. So no shame in that. And then last time we talked about the maiden victory, showed improved tactical speed and just continued to widen away from that field through the stretch. And given those bloodlines, you would imagine that added distance is not going to be a problem. And Brad, I guess we can have a little more confidence about him compared to some other horses that might be coming off 90 plus Beyer maiden wins, because at least he did it around 2 turns with some foundation under his belt. The problem is he did it in the middle of February. So now they're kind of in a situation where they're only going to be able to contest one Derby prep to try to get into the starting gate on the first Saturday in May.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the Santa Anita Derby a little bit later on in this segment. And the point situation is a little scary for a horse who currently has 0 points. Baeza 0 points, Derby qualifying points. So it's all or nothing in the Santa Anita Derby in early April. Okay, the Sunland Derby was run last weekend, and this is a race that's does not typically produce, Kentucky Derby aspirants, although it was won last year by Stronghold. Stronghold came back and won the Santa Anita Derby in his next start. David, did we see anything extraordinary in the Sunland Derby last weekend?
Well, I think expectations were relatively low heading into the Sunland Derby, so I would say the race exceeded expectations, at least in terms of the Beyer speed figure, because we had a couple of horses improving to earn 90 plus Beyers in this race. And of course, they are the two that you see dueling through the stretch here. Caldera on the outside is just going to lose a head bob to Getaway Car along the inside as they come onto the wire here. And I think that there had been some concerns about how far a horse like Getaway Car really wanted to go. And maybe that's why Bob Baffert chose this prep for him, sticking out the mile and a 16th distance at Sunland Park. But at least he's been improving, and you can't say that it didn't keep good company before that race, Brad, because he has faced some of the best 2-year-olds in Southern California last year, and the class relief just worked for him. And Caldera, kind of unfortunate he wasn't able to get the win, because now he's a little bit behind the 8 ball from a point standpoint, trying to get maybe a points in a 100-point prep next time out, but he did improve his Beyer as well, and I guess he's a horse that we could consider for Derby Watch consideration based on his next race.
Yeah, if he can rack up a few more points. As for Getaway Car, you're right. He'd been running against the likes of Journalism and Citizen Bull. He got some class relief at Sunland. I thought that this race had the potential to completely fall apart on the lead with a ton of speed horses in the field, but I think the speed of the speed and the best speed was able to re-rally for the win down on the inside. Getaway Car, I still have doubts, David, if he's a true 1 1/4 horse. I still remember his dam was a very fast sprint dam by the name of Surrender Now. He does get stamina from the top side by being sired by Curlin. I'm not sure how far this horse wants to go, but as we speak today, he has 36 Derby qualifying points, and he's currently ranked second among active horses. So we're going to find out more about Getaway Car wherever Baffert runs him next. And let's just move right into our On the Bubble segment. It's the same list virtually as last week, with one addition. Getaway Car did not make our top 20, but with 36 qualifying points, he is definitely on the bubble. Bullard runs this weekend in the Rebel Stakes at Oaklawn Park. John Hancock and Poster 1-3 finishers from the Sam Davis. And then a horse that you kind of like, David, still sitting there on the bubble, Surfside Moon. By the way, Surfside Moon, as of early this week, I know we've talked about maybe making a wager on him. He's 125-1 at Caesars in Las Vegas.
I'll see if I can get down on that. That sounds like a pretty juicy price for any horse you like moving on towards the Kentucky Derby. And we considered all of these horses to potentially add to Derby Watch this week, particularly the two from the Sam Davis that we kind of dismissed last week, but we kind of decided to stick with that initial impression of the race. So all of these horses are going to have to prove something in their subsequent starts to get onto the list. And the first one that we'll see is Bullard competing in the Rebel this week.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting race down at Oaklawn Park, where the weather this week has been nothing short of brutal. Okay, let's talk about the Rebel Stakes. It's race number 11 on Sunday. They moved the race from Saturday to Sunday. David, I believe that you and Mike Beer are going to analyze the Rebel Stakes in full detail. So let's talk a little bit in general about this. 50 Derby points to the winner. And a virtual guaranteed spot in the Kentucky Derby. Who do you see as the principals in this race?
It's hard to pick out just one or two principals because it is a highly competitive race. We've got a few Derby Watch runners on this list, and Sandman, as well as Speed King and Tiztastic, and they're all single digits on the morning line. But as you can tell from this morning line, it is a wide open race. Not sure exactly where the bettors are going to go. I would guess that Sandman is going to be the favorite just based on the trip that he got in the Southwest last time with so much trouble at the start. But he is a horse that's going to have to get out of the gate cleanly in a 14-horse field trying to avoid some traffic. At the very least, Brad, this should be a good trial for the kind of trips horses will face in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, there's no question about that. There are 4 horses that we have on the Derby Watch top 20 who are in the Rebel field: Coal Battle, Sandman, Speed King, and Tiztastic. And then you add Bullard, who's currently on the bubble. And that's 5 horses that we're keeping a close eye on. As far as, generally speaking, when it comes to winter, spring stakes races at Oaklawn Park for 3-year-olds, Bob Baffert is, you always have to give his horses a second look. In the last 15 years, Baffert has sent 42 3-year-olds to Oaklawn Park for graded stakes races in the meet. 42, 19 wins, 7 seconds and 4 thirds. And in the Rebel, Baffert is 8 for 16. I bring it up because Baffert sent a horse named Madaket Road, who ran just okay, finishing 3rd last time out in California. But I suspect that the bitter cold weather in Arkansas and uncertain track condition might be one reason why Baffert did not ship horses that I consider to be more his A team, like Barnes and Rodriguez, who were both discussed as potential Rebel starters. Baffert is electing to keep them home. He put Madaket Road out on the road. I think Madaket Road is kind of a B player in that stable. But again, when Baffert ships into Oaklawn Park, you always have to take a long second look. What's your take on Madaket Road? I'm not that thrilled with him.
I was thinking the exact same thing that you were, Brad, that maybe there was some doubt about the conditions at Oaklawn, and Baffert just did not want to send one of his A-listers to this race. And Madaket Road probably ready to run, so why not give him a start here? I will say I was looking up some stats in DRF Formulator for Bob Baffert, and he has had an amazing 16 winners at Oaklawn over the past 5 years, from I think just 34 starters. Of those 16 winners, the biggest price among them was 2-1. Madaket Road is no 2-1 shot in this race.
No, I think he's listed at 9-2 or something like 9-2, and he could go up higher than that if bettors gravitate towards Sandman, as we kind of expect. This race will set up the Arkansas Derby that will be run in late March, and hopefully by then the weather will have cleared out and we'll be back to regular training on a fast track. But the Rebel Stakes, it's a big field, a good field, and David, you and Mike will be taking a in-depth look at that. The other stakes race that will be run this weekend is on Saturday. It's the John Battaglia. Again, not a race that normally produces a lot of Kentucky Derby contestants. You and Ashley, David, will be looking at the John Battaglia in detail. I suspect that First Resort is going to be one of the horses that will attract a lot of play.
Yeah, First Resort is the only runner from our Derby watch list that is competing in this John Battaglia. And I mean, he did everything right as a 2-year-old on the dirt, winning that Kentucky Jockey Club at the end of the year over some horses that people like Jonathan's Way and Tis Tastic. And interesting that Owen Hardy is electing to begin his 3-year-old campaign on synthetic. He has been training through the winter at Turfway Park, so he should be familiar with the surface by this point, but it's an unconventional route to take to the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, it is. And I asked Hardy that question a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about, the preparation for First Resort. And I said, why synthetic? And Owen Hardy looked at me like, is that a serious question? It's where he trains. That's where First Resort is based. So there's no uncertainty with regards to track condition. He can run out of his own stall, out on the racetrack. Here's my concern with regards to First Resort. And it deals with the Kentucky Jockey Club that he won last fall. That race has turned out to be not much of a race. The runner-up, Jonathan's Way, has not started since then, and his status is uncertain. Tis Tastic, he did finish third in the Southwest with some trouble, and the fourth place finisher, Dapper Moon, came back to win an allowance sprint a couple starts later. But the rest of the field, nobody has really distinguished that race. So I'm not sure if First Resort won that race because there was nobody in the field, or whether he won that race because he's a good colt. I think we're going to find out some answers in the Battaglia on Saturday. All right, there are 3 stakes races next weekend that have a lot more significance than the Battaglia, those being the Fountain of Youth at Gulfstream Park, the San Felipe at Santa Anita, and the Gotham Stakes, a 1-turn mile at Aqueduct. Before we talk briefly about this, let's talk about the potential for small fields in a couple of these races. And I bring it up because last year, the Fountain of Youth was run with 5 starters. The San Felipe at Santa Anita was run with 4 starters. Churchill Downs has, as part of their guidelines for points going into the Kentucky Derby, has this statement on one of their press releases. Let's go ahead and put that quote up. And that is, in the event of championship series race, that's with 50 points or more to the winner, is run with the 5-horse field, only 75% of the points will be proportionally awarded. Likewise, in a 4-horse field, it's down to 50%. David, we're probably a little premature to be talking about points, but if these races come up with short fields, it's going to put some of the contestants in a little bit of a dicey situation with regards to how many points they can earn.
And maybe we're not so premature to be talking about this because this rule got triggered last week on the Oaks Trail when the Rachel Alexandra was run with just 4 horses and only 50% of the allotted points were awarded to winner Good Cheer as well as the rest of that field. And, Brad, connections might be upset about this rule because you point for a specific path and you can't really control who else is running in the race. And if you get less points than you are really planning on, if your horse does well, it's got to be disappointing and obviously frustrating if that's what ultimately keeps you out of the Kentucky Derby. We're a long way from that happening, obviously. But I do think it makes a certain amount of sense because you have to beat somebody to earn your way into the Kentucky Derby field. So it seems to me like a pretty fair rule from Churchill Downs.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with that rule at all. And in fact, I was a little skeptical about this whole point system, when they began it 10 years ago or whenever it was. I think that as the years have progressed, I don't think there have been too many horses who deserved a chance in the Kentucky Derby, but were excluded because they didn't have enough points. Generally speaking, the cream rises to the top. The best horses accumulate the most points. And I think that the first Saturday in May, most of the time, it has the best 3-year-olds currently in training. As far as next week San Felipe goes, it's a week from Saturday at Santa Anita. Right now, I have only 3 confirmed starters. And they're not even confirmed. Barnes and Rodriguez from the Baffert stable and Journalism trained by Michael McCarthy. And then looking down the road at the Santa Anita Derby, we have Citizen Bull Baeza, and then whoever runs well in the San Felipe and whoever comes back from Arkansas back to California. So we're looking at a couple of small fields in the final Santa Anita prep races. The Fountain of Youth next weekend, Sovereignty, Burnham Square, and River Thames are among the principals in that. And then, of course, the Gotham generally gets a decent sized field, and Sand Devil is expected to be one of the favorites in the Gotham. Well, that is a wrap for this week. It's 1 week in closer to the Kentucky Derby, a little bit more pressure, a little bit more change. Magnitude and East Avenue both encountered some misfortune last week. whereas others moved up, including Well-Bred Baeza at Santa Anita. The road continues this weekend, slightly more than 10 weeks to go until the Kentucky Derby. The Rebel Stakes on Sunday at Oaklawn, the Battaglia on Saturday at Turfway Park. We'll talk about all those races next week on the Derby Watch Top 20 for David Aragona. I'm Brad Free. We'll see you next week.